Tuma Kamijo is an ordinary high school student seriously plagued by bad luck. Despite his misfortunes, Tuma has gotten used to his condition and has learned to live with it. His fate all changed this one night in Academy City on July 19th when Tuma entered a local restaurant and made a bad decision to order their lasagna. If only he knew what life had in store for him that night. As he waited for his order, Tuma noticed a thug harassing an innocent woman nearby. Driven by his sense of justice, he grows some hair and confronts the thug, not knowing there were other thugs just waiting for him nearby. Just when he thought he was making a headwind with the situation on the ground, the thug calls his boys and orders them to chase Tuma all around the city. Running for his life, he managed to reach a bridge where he found the lady he saved earlier on. It was then revealed that Tuma's interference in the fight earlier was to save the thugs from the lady, as it turns out that she's the city's strongest esper with remarkable lightning powers. If Tuma hadn't stepped in back then, the dudes would have met a hot end. The lady engages Tuma in a discussion about Fleming coins, railguns, and a few other scientific stuff I probably don't know much about. Being a level 0 esper, Tuma pleaded for mercy from the lady as she prepared to unleash the strongest attack in her arsenal. She launches her attack and gets the shock of her life as Tuma quells it in just one punch. The lady gets more enraged and powers up her attacks. This time, the power of the attack destroys some electricity lines and causes a widespread blackout across half of the town. The following morning, Tuma wakes up in his hot apartment completely drained and tired. Since the power was out from the blackout, the foodstuff in his refrigerator already got spoiled, causing a foul stench in the air. Tuma sighs and takes off his bedding to spread them on his balcony. Getting there, he finds a girl dressed in a weird church-like cloth. Before he could say anything, the girl wakes up and asks him for some food. Tuma sluggishly brings her into his room and offers some of the sour-spoiled food from his fridge. To his surprise, the girl actually enjoys the food and even thanks him for it. Consumed by guilt for serving her spoiled food, Tuma promptly munches it himself. The girl introduces herself as Index, explaining that she is an index for forbidden texts and has memorized every page of the 103,000 grimoires stored in the English Church's library. Tuma asks her about the location of these grimoires only to find out that they were hidden from ordinary people like him. Index also tells him about her magical abilities and the things she can do with them. However, Tuma refuses to believe her and asks for some proof. Index picks a knife and asks him to stab her. However, Tuma holds her clothes and accidentally rips them apart, leaving her exposed and embarrassed. After repairing her attire, Index prepares to leave Tuma for her next destination. Tuma asks her about her enemies, but she refuses to tell him much about them. Attempting to follow her, Tuma stumbles, falls, and crushes his phone. He then gets up and asks if she had any other place to go, to which Index tells her she's seeking refuge in any church nearby. Index leaves shortly for the church. Tuma gets back to life and remembers his extra lessons. He rushes back inside and gets his things. Within Academy City, a metropolis housing over 2 million citizens, where 80% of the population consisted of students admitted to various colleges, Tuma found himself in detention due to his poor academic performance. Even his extra class teacher, someone smaller than him, complains about his incompetence. While in the class, Tuma begins thinking about Index and her current situation. Once his extra lesson is done, Tuma makes his way back home and finds the electricity level 5 esper he met at the bridge the previous night. Misaka challenges Tuma to a rematch, but he declines and gives her the victory. An angered Misaka unleashes thunderbolts, which Tuma dodges and ignores. Upon reaching his home, Tuma finds Index lying wounded at his entrance. He gets closer and finds out the severity of his injuries. Before he could react, another magician arrives and makes fun of Index and Tuma. The magician tells Tuma that his colleague Kanzaki was the one who harmed Index. Despite Tuma's efforts to wake her up, Index remains unconscious. Tuma gets very angry and attacks the magician blindly. However, the magician, who calls himself Style, requests that Tuma step aside so he can retrieve Index's body. Tuma seeks an explanation for his behavior, and Style proceeds to tell him about Index's powerful photogenic brain and abilities. He also warns Tuma about the danger posed by Index's knowledge of the grimoires and tells him he'll take Index's body regardless of anything Tuma feels about it. Filled with anger, Tuma throws a punch at Stale, who evades it and summons his magic creature, Innocentius. Tuma is surprised as the creature appears and attacks him. Using his unique ability, Tuma suppresses Innocentius and prepares to retaliate. Style attempts to fire another fireball, but Tuma absorbs the magic once again. Determined, Style chants a magical spell to summon a stronger version of Innocentius. Tuma struggles to dispel the enhanced Innocentius. In the midst of this, Index suddenly awakens in a robotic state and starts revealing important secrets to Tuma. Stale quickly stops her, summons another fireball, and throws it at Tuma. Escaping the fight, Tuma runs through the corridors and finds strange talismans on the walls. He wonders about their significance. Innocentius catches up to him and chases him to a dead end. Tuma quickly passes through the dead end and falls to the ground level. Innocentius launches a flaming beam, but Tuma manages to dodge it. Tuma takes out his phone to call the police, but soon discovers that the phone is destroyed when he fell down back then. He considers running away but decides against it. As Stale approaches Index to touch her, the sprinklers on the ceiling activate, showering water on him. Tuma regains his footing through the elevators and confronts Style, surprising him. Style asks about Innocentius, and Tuma explains that he has weakened its powers. Style had placed papers with ink around Tuma's apartment to keep the magic spells active during their fight. By activating the sprinklers, the water washed away some of the ink, rendering the runes useless. Tuma dispels the remaining power of Innocentius and confronts Style, delivering a single punch that knocks him out. A few hours later, the police and fire department arrive at the scene to handle the aftermath of the fight. Tuma takes Index to a secluded area of town and ponders how to help his injured friend. Index wakes up briefly and shares some information before fainting again. Tuma asks about the 103,000 grimoires stored in Index's mind, but she informs him that his current brain capacity is unable to absorb such powers. Tuma decides to take Index to his extra lesson teacher's house. Upon arriving, he pleads to be allowed inside and places Index on the floor. Suddenly, Index's body lights up and provides Tuma with instructions for her healing. She asks him to leave the room to avoid disrupting the healing process with his magic dispelling ability. Tuma exits the room and rushes outside. As he runs through the city, Kanzaki, Style's female colleague, watches over him from above. Index's subconscious body wakes up and asks Tuma's teacher to assist in performing a healing ritual. Index draws a magic circle with her blood and requests the teacher's hand and voice for the completion of the ritual. The teacher hesitates and suggests they wait for medical help, but Index insists ordinary treatments won't work for her. Index asks the teacher to bring specific items and place them in the center of the magic circle. Following Index instructions, the teacher gathers the items including Oreos and an SD card and awaits further instructions. They begin the ritual, with Index leading the chant and the teacher following along with voice and actions. The power release causes the room to shake violently and leaves the teacher distracted and halting the ritual. Despite the distraction, the link is successfully formed, merging the table and the teacher's room. In the next part of the ritual, Index tells the teacher that she's to visualize the image of a golden angel in her mind. The teacher gives it a shot but fails on her first try, resulting in the floor trembling as she sinks into it. In a final desperate attempt, the teacher conjures the golden angel correctly. Index interrupts her and tries once more. This time, some objects on the table start to melt, and the golden angel appears again, staying for longer this time around. The ritual concludes, and Index enters a dormant state once again. The following day, Tuma visits the girls to check on them and finds Index wearing his teacher's pajamas. He gets confused and starts asking them questions about their identities. Index teases the teacher and questions Tuma about their relationship. Tuma identifies Index as the teacher's sister and expresses gratitude for her assistance in keeping Index safe from her enemies. The teacher prepares to go to the supermarket, leaving Index and Tuma at home. During her absence, Index informs Tuma that his teacher, who calls herself Como, should no longer use magic. Tuma urges Index to explain what magic means to her, prompting her to reveal the burden she carries. She explains that she hails from the Necessarius Church, which employs good magic to combat evil. Index possesses the ability to memorize vast amounts of information and unintentionally memorized all 103,000 grimoires. Tuma becomes frustrated with Index for keeping him in the dark about her abilities. Index attempts to gain sympathy by crying, but Tuma playfully spanks her forehead, reassuring her that he has his right hand to rely on. Index reminds Tuma of his extra lessons, and despite his attempt to brush them off, she insists he attends school. A few buildings away, Style and Kanzaki observe Index and Tuma through binoculars, determining their location and devising a battle strategy against Tuma, who protects Index. Kanzaki speculates that Tuma must be using some form of magic to negate magical attacks. Style expresses remorse for the harm caused to Index as she appears content with Tuma and Como, his teacher. Nevertheless, they understand their duty. Later that night, Tuma and Index step outside for fresh air. Index happily recounts what Como taught her while Tuma was at school. She mentions not remembering much about her initial moments in Japan and not understanding certain things. Sensing Tuma's anger, Index questions his true feelings and he opens up to her. In response, Index becomes angry and bites Tuma's hand before returning home. Tuma continues walking alone on the streets when suddenly, the lights go out and everybody on the street disappears. He keeps his eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary until Kanzaki appears. Tuma is confused when he realizes that all the people around him have disappeared in just 1 minute. Kanzaki appears and explains that she evacuated everyone using a rune. She reveals her real name and attacks Tuma with powerful sonic powers. Tuma, however, manages to dodge the attacks. Kanzaki is aware of Tuma's special right-hand power, Imagine Breaker, and has prepared for it. Tuma bravely tries to fight back and land a hit on her, but Kanzaki's attacks keep pushing him away. During the fight, Tuma notices thin wires set up around Kanzaki, making escape seem impossible. Kanzaki insists that surrender is the only way for Tuma to survive this battle. However, Tuma refuses to give up because Index has become his friend, and her possession of the Grimoire Encyclopedia doesn't make her any less human. He criticizes Kanzaki's actions and trash talks her, Fed up with Tuma's persistence, Kanzaki reveals the truth. It turns out that Index was Kanzaki's colleague, and Kanzaki never intended to harm her. In fact, she believes Index would be better off if left alone. However, Kanzaki and Stale have been doing everything they can to save their dear friend and colleague. Index's ability to instantly memorize information puts a tremendous strain on her brain, and she absorbs not only necessary information but also unnecessary details. Currently, her brain has used over 85% of its storage capacity to hold all kinds of information from the past year. To prevent her brain from overloading, Kanzaki and Stale need to erase some of her memories and stabilize her memory usage. Also, the deadline for that year's memory erasure is 3 days from that day. If they don't erase her memories in time, they might lose her. Kanzaki asks Tuma to surrender Index so they can do the necessary. However, Tuma refuses and accuses them of giving up on Index too easily. He continues to speak his mind, annoying Kanzaki even more. Losing control, Kanzaki attacks Tuma with her sword, pummeling him to the ground and tearfully insisting they have no choice. Tuma, however, stands back up and tells Kanzaki that they are still avoiding the truth that Index may have the chance to live with 100% of her brain capacity. Kanzaki listens as Tuma passionately talks about Index's potential for a full life. After his speech, Tuma faints and Style takes over. Meanwhile, in Academy City, Kuroko and Misaka return from a supermarket and notice a crowd gathering around a strange platform that crashed into a small bridge. Curious, Kuroko steps forward to investigate, leaving Misaka behind. Misaka looks around the crowd and spots Index in her church attire leaving the scene, but she doesn't pay much attention to it as she didn't know Index that well at the time. 3 days after the attack, Tuma wakes up in Komo's apartment and finds Index by his side. He is shocked to learn that 3 days have passed since the fight. He recalls the events in Kanzaki's words, wondering if there is truth to them. Index tells him that Komo found him lying unconscious in the middle of the road and brought him home. Index feels sorry for not being able to help her friend and apologizes. She offers to heal Tuma with her magic, but he insists he will be fine without it. This annoys Index, but she accepts his decision. Later, Index gets up to make breakfast for Tuma, who tries to avoid eating it. However, Index pours the food on his head. Just then, they hear a knock on their door. When they open it, Kanzaki and Stale are waiting outside. Index stands in front of Tuma, begging them to let her friend go. Style and Kanzaki leave Komo's place after listening to Index's pleas. That evening, Tuma sits near Index as she sleeps and remembers his earlier meeting with the magicians. He realizes that the memory erasure is scheduled to happen in a few hours, but Index is still at Komo's house. As he watches her sleep, Kanzaki calls Tuma, and he answers the call. She asks if Index is with them, and Tuma confirms that she is. Kanzaki informs him that he should say his final goodbyes because they will soon come for Index to perform the memory erasure at midnight. Tuma asks if there's any other way they can do it, but Kanzaki tells him their way is the only one they know. Tuma suggests they try using science to find an alternative solution. However, Kanzaki insists that surrendering Index to them is the only way to complete their mission. Tuma refuses to do so and instead threatens to fight them until he can no longer stand. Kanzaki challenges him to bring his best because he has until midnight to surrender Index or face the consequences. She hangs up the call, leaving Tuma with a sense of urgency. Tuma tries to find books on psychotic drugs that could potentially wipe Index's memory, but his search is unsuccessful. He attempts to contact smart students for help, but most of them are asleep since it's a school night. Feeling hopeless, Tuma believes all is lost until one of the students calls back. However, realizing it's already midnight, he drops the call and prepares for the arrival of Style and Kanzaki. The duo wastes no time and quickly reaches the house. By then, Index is already suffering from the overload of memories. They push Tuma aside and assess the situation. Tuma pleads for a chance to find an alternative solution that won't result in Index losing all her memories. Eventually, Style grows tired of Tuma's pleas and questions whether he can live with the risk of endangering Index's life through his trial and error method. Tuma is left speechless and broken as he doesn't want to lose his dear friend too soon. Style begins drawing the spell circle on the wall of the room. When he's done, he informs Tuma that the ritual will begin in 10 minutes. Kanzaki speaks with Style and grants Tuma some additional time to say his final words to Index. After Style and Kanzaki leave the room, Index wakes up and urges Tuma to escape from her enemies while he still can. Tuma puts her back to sleep and thinks more calmly, realizing something strange. How did Kanzaki and Stale know about the specific percentages of Index's brain usage? He quickly calls his teacher, Komo, seeking more information. Komo tells Tuma that it's physically impossible for the human brain to explode from an information overload. This revelation shocks Tuma. Nonetheless, Komo emphasizes that the human brain cannot be overwhelmed by too much information. This leads Tuma to conclude that someone must be lying, either the church or Kanzaki and Style. He immediately begins to consider the church as the one spreading the lies. With very little time remaining, Tuma places his right hand on Index's forehead, hoping to negate any magical spell that the church might have placed on her in the past. His first attempt fails, so he decides to go deeper. This time, he puts his finger in Index's mouth and encounters a strange and dark magic. This magic shocks him and transforms Index into a robotic state. Index's subconscious perceives Tuma as a threat and activates, conjuring a deadly subconscious Index weapon in the form of lasers to fight against Tuma, the intruder. Index's subconscious robot fires magic lasers at Tuma, but he absorbs them with his right hand. Style and Kanzaki are shocked to see Index using elemental powers, even though she's not an Esper. Tuma reveals the truth to them, explaining that the church lied to them and put them under stress to keep Index from telling them too many details about the grimoires hidden in her photographic brain. Index robot intensifies the attack to eliminate Tuma and protect the church's secret. However, Tuma strengthens his right hand and continues to absorb the attack. Stale intervenes and uses his magic to halt the assault. Tuma challenges them, asking if they truly want to save Index's life. He urges them to join him in stopping the attack and becoming main characters in their own story instead of remaining as side characters. Kanzaki joins the fight and uses the Salver 000 spell to dispel Index's magic attacks. This not only stops the attack but also redirects the laser beam through the roof and into the sky. Index robot stumbles briefly but resumes its attack. Style summons Innocentius to shield Tuma, but Index robot amplifies its attack and destroys Innocentius. Tuma seizes the opportunity and approaches Index's body. He places his right hand on her forehead, absorbing the source of the magic spell until there's nothing left to sustain the attack. Index ceases attacking and faints while white feathers descend from the roof. Tuma holds Index in his arms briefly before succumbing to exhaustion and fainting himself. The next day, Index visits Tuma in the hospital. The doctor asks them if they were involved in the satellite destruction that occurred the previous night. Index claims she doesn't know what happened. The doctor hands her a letter from Style and Kanzaki addressed to Tuma. Index opens the letter and discovers that she has been entrusted to Tuma's care temporarily as the church is dealing with the consequences of their deception. Suddenly, the letter explodes. The doctor advises Index to go see Tuma and express her gratitude for his help. Index heads to a nearby clinic and knocks on the door. Tuma welcomes her inside but pretends not to remember who she is. Despite his joking, Tuma reveals that he actually remembers everything, including the church's lies. Index tries to help him recall his past, but her efforts are in vain. When she's on the verge of tears, Tuma stops joking and assures her that he remembers everything. He explains that he used his power to cancel the effects of memory loss in his brain. Although Index doesn't believe him at first, she becomes annoyed with him for initially lying. When the doctor enters the room, he finds Index leaving in a hurry. He speaks with Tuma and asks if he still has a heart despite losing his memories. Tuma reassures him that he's fine. 2 weeks later, Style visits an underground laboratory and encounters an upside-down humanoid machine known as the Great Superintendent, Eldest. Eldest instructs Style to temporarily partner with Tuma to maintain balance in the world and work together to find a person called the Deep Blood. This person possesses unique powers capable of eliminating a certain organism that threatens global peace. The next day, Index goes with Tuma to the bookstore to get some reference books. When they are finished, Tuma exits and lemons the cost of the textbook. What can they do with the 3,600 yen they have left in their bank, wonders Index. Index wanders off and starts glancing at an ice cream signboard as Tuma mulls over what to do with the remaining cash. As Tuma approaches her, she makes fun of her ice cream hankerings. As a result of his frustration, Index starts speaking at the speed of light. Tuma becomes lost in his thoughts as he considers what would have happened if the incident from 2 weeks ago hadn't caused him to lose his memory. Index calls him out of his thoughts and begs him to buy her ice cream. Just then, 2 of Tuma's nincompoop buddies show up just in time to taunt and annoy him as usual before he makes a choice. They inquire about the strange young girl standing close by after noticing her. When Tuma sees his buddies, he feels so humiliated that he makes every effort to get rid of them. In order to convince her friend to purchase her ice cream, Index notices this and employs the final tactic in her book. Tuma is now left with no choice than to grant her requests. The next scene shows Tuma using his money to purchase a full dinner for Index and each of his 2 companions. Tuma approaches their table after receiving his food and discovers a brunette woman dozing out next to Index. She resists his attempts to wake her up. The lady finally wakes up after some persuasion and requests Tuma's help in finding her misplaced 100 yen after placing many orders. Tuma declines to give her his money. The girl, whom they refer to as the Shrine Girl, asks Index and his other 2 buddies for some cash. However, none of them will give up their cash for a stranger. They keep referring to the lady as a Shrine Girl, but she claims to be a magician. Index attempts to get to know her further, but the lady irritates her. The girl's bodyguards show up at the restaurant to pick her up as they continue talking. When Tuma inquires about their identities, the girl replies that they are her cram school instructors. Tuma and Index then proceed to walk home once she leaves. They come upon an abandoned cat en route that Index wants to adopt. She begs Tuma if she can take her cat, which she has named Sphinx, home. Tuma, however, tells her that pets are not permitted in the dorms. Index screams out in frustration, scaring the cat away. Tuma is left alone in the street while Index pursues the cat to find it. After she leaves, Style places a rune over that area of town and then manifests it to Tuma. Alerted, Tuma asks what he has done to Index. Style assures him that Index is okay and is merely pursuing the cat. But they also have another problem to deal with. He informs Tuma of the deep blood female now held captive at the Misawa Cram School. The once famous institution had already been transformed into a false religious cult that worships science. He continues, telling Tuma that Aureolus Izzard, a genuine alchemist from Zurich who has been evading them for the past 3 years, has been keeping her there. Tuma asks Style as to the significance of the girl. Style informs him that she is the only person with the ability to eliminate vampires. Tuma considers turning down the invitation to assist Style in his investigation. Style, though, explains why he shouldn't decline the offer. Style completes his task, releases the rune, and leaves. Index and Tuma return to the dorm at the same moment. Tuma discovers something moving in Index's clothing at the door. He forces her into showing him what's moving underneath. Index, however, is violently opposed. Tuma discovers that Index actually brought the cat home after some pressure. Index begs him to let her keep the cat as he tries to dispose of it. Eventually, Tuma agrees to let her keep the cat as long as she always keeps it inside. Index appreciates Tuma for his generosity. When Tuma goes outdoors, he sees Style scattering talismans all over the place. Style explains that he is only positioning Innocentius around the structure to safeguard Index while they are away when the man is asked why. Once they're done, Style takes Tuma to the cram school and gives him a picture of the girl they're to protect. On checking out the picture, Tuma finds out they're looking for Himgami, the girl he saw at the restaurant earlier that day. The duo enter the school and find 2 corpses lying on the ground. Style and Tuma find themselves inside the school, where they discover the bodies of the dead soldiers, lying unnoticed by the students. They soon find out that the students are currently under the influence of a powerful magic spell. Style informs Tuma that the spell is contained within a core located somewhere in the building, and destroying it would restore the students to their normal state. They then decide to head to the stairs and begin ascending, with Tuma questioning why they didn't opt for the elevator. Style explains that electronic devices might not be permitted in enemy territory. Tuma takes out his phone to test Style's theory. He places a call to Index and talks to her a little bit before hanging up. After the call, Style displays a little jealousy as he notices Tuma and Index had gotten a bit closer than before. Upon reaching the cafeteria, they come across students seemingly engaged in casual conversations and playful activities. However, as soon as the students noticed Style and Tuma, everything came to a halt. The students turned their attention towards them and began chanting incantations, which is a clear indication of their hostility. Style notices the danger in the air and makes a run for it, leaving Tuma bewildered. He soon notices small magical orbs materializing from the students' heads and giving chase. In an attempt to save himself, Style pushed Tuma into the path of the orbs, sacrificing him as a distraction while he made his way to safety. Tuma stumbled down a flight of stairs and found himself face to face with a student who was chanting incantations. The orbs relentlessly attacked the student until she eventually lost consciousness. However, the orbs kept on coming towards Tuma until they were dispersed by Himgami, the very student they had been searching for. Meanwhile, Izzard had lured Style to another part of the school, plotting to corner and confront him. He dispatches a few students to attack Style, but Style fights back and successfully incapacitates them. At that moment, Izzard emerges, preparing himself for a battle against Style. While the incident at the cram school takes place, Index is seen taking a bath in Tuma's bathroom, reflecting on their recent phone call. She finds it weird that Tuma had responded calmly, considering his usual frustration towards her. Index ends her bathing, dresses up, and gets out to search for Tuma. At the same time, Himgami brings out a police club from her attire, planning to perform CPR on the unconscious student. However, Tuma intervenes, urging Himgami to leave the building since she had the freedom to roam. Himgami explained that she had a specific objective to fulfill within the school. As someone whose blood attracted vampires, she had spent a long time killing them, but had grown tired of it and desired to put an end to her involvement. Tuma questioned her motives for aiding Izzard if she no longer wished to kill vampires. Himgami revealed that she was assisting Izzard in capturing a vampire sample, claiming that Izzard had promised to keep her hands clean. At that moment, Izzard makes his appearance. Tuma blindly launches an attack, but Izzard compels him to stop. Just as the situation becomes heated, Himgami intervenes and prevents any further violence. Izzard then used his power to compel Tuma to forget everything he had learned and resumed his journey. Meanwhile, Index tracks Tuma's energy to the cram school building. Tuma wakes up to find himself on a swing toy, feeling enraged at Style for using him as bait. Meanwhile, Izzard finds Index at the entrance of the building and compels her to fall into a deep slumber. Style and Tuma hurriedly return to the building, only to be confronted by the remaining members of the 13 Holy Knights. These knights employ Holy Magic Bombardment, a spell that harnessed the power of the church to upgrade Izzard's true ability, Ars Magna. Once the spell was complete, Style and Tuma find Sphinx outside the building, indicating that Index had been there recently and is likely captured. Style and Tuma are rushing into the cram school to search for Izzard's location. Meanwhile, Izzard has already taken Index to a room upstairs. Style and Tuma find Izzard in the middle of planning a ritual on Index, with Himgami by his side. Style realizes that Izard's true intention is to perform the memory erasure ritual on Index once again. Apparently, Izard is unaware that Tuma had already disproved the theory about Index's brain capacity a while ago. Style explains to Tuma that Izard used to be Index's partner 3 years ago, but her memories of him were erased. Izard believes that vampires have unlimited brain capacity, allowing them to remember things for a long time and overuse their brains when necessary. Now, Izard intends to attract a vampire using Himigami's deep blood powers and bring it to the cram school. He plans to capture the vampire and turn Index into a vampire as well, so she wouldn't have to undergo memory erasure anymore. However, Style informs Izard that their plans are no longer necessary. Apart from being a risky method, Tuma has already made it clear that Index, being human, cannot simply die from knowing too much. Izard is flabbergasted and refuses to believe Tuma's theory, considering him just a powerless human. Style warns Izard that he should believe Tuma or else he will have only himself to blame. Style also reveals Tuma's imaginary breaker powers, which are the hidden ability in his right arm to cancel magic. Izard falls into despair and takes a seat. At that moment, Index wakes up and asks Tuma for some food as she's hungry. Izard mocks them for making a fool out of him and orders them to fall on their faces. Style and Tuma comply and fall flat on the ground. Izard then commands them to kill each other. Himigami steps in and manages to distract Izard long enough to break free from his compulsion. Izard turns his attention to Himigami and orders her to fall down and die. Tuma quickly stands up and holds Himigami to prevent her from hitting her head. Himigami's life flashes before her eyes as she faces the imminent threat. She recalls the first time she met Izard and the calm expression on his face despite her being a vampire attractor. Tuma uses his imaginary breaker to cancel Izard's effect on Himigami. Now that she is alive, he gently places her down and confronts his enemy, Izard. Izard takes out another pin and compels Tuma to suffocate, get crushed, and be shocked by lightning. However, Tuma uses his right hand to cancel all the effects. Realizing that Tuma can repel his attacks, Izard decides to step up his game. He conjures several guns in his hands and fires them all at once. Tuma is hit by multiple bullets, but miraculously, he manages to survive. Style, who is still lying on the ground, starts questioning Izard's supposed omnipotence, planting seeds of doubt in Izard's mind. Izard tears Style into pieces and then resumes facing Tuma. Tuma ponders Style's words and wonders why Izard needed so many instruments for his plan when he could simply speak things into existence. This leads Tuma to a realization. Izard's words of compulsion are illusions that only affect the victims as long as Izard believes they are real. So all they need to do is make him doubt his own power. Izard shoots off Tuma's right hand and begins to laugh at him. However, Tuma stands back up with his right hand sliced off and walks closer to Izard. Izard becomes very afraid and steps back from the formidable figure in front of him. Tuma gets uncomfortably close to Izard and ultimately destroys him for good. The next day, Tuma is admitted to the hospital to have his right hand fixed once again. The doctor is surprised to see him hospitalized twice in 10 days. Later, Style visits Tuma and cuts an apple for him. He informs Tuma that Izard lost his memory and ability to use magic due to their attack. The association also shuts down the cram school and releases the students from the magic spell they were under. While they are discussing these events, Index arrives with Himigami to check on her favorite person. Upon entering the room, Himigami asks Tuma why he helped her earlier. Tuma tells her that he has no specific reason and that he felt obliged to do so. Himigami looks at him, contemplating the true motive behind his actions. In Academy City, a woman who resembles Misaka at the level 5 Esper from the school is seen targeting a guy she calls Accelerator with her sniper rifle. She takes aim and fires at him, but he effortlessly deflects the bullets, causing them to strike her instead. She is injured and unable to escape. The next day, Tuma attends a makeup class and decides to buy a drink from a crazy vending machine. However, to his disappointment, the machine swallows his money without dispensing his drink. His misfortune strikes again. Just as he contemplates his misfortune, Misaka appears with a dramatic entrance. She swiftly kicks the ghost out of the vending machine and successfully retrieves a drink for herself. Tuma laments his lost money and Misaka, displaying her sarcastically kind nature, offers to assist him. She uses her electric shock to shock the heck out of the machine, causing it to release multiple drinks for both of them. Misaka picks up all the drinks and hands them over to Tuma while he sits on an outdoor bench. They engage in conversation, discussing the time when Tuma defeated Misaka on a bridge. However, Tuma struggles to remember his misery all began as he lost part of his memories from the Index fight. Determined not to reveal his memory loss, he pretends to recall the encounter and Misaka believes him. Suddenly, Kuroko arrives on the scene and teasingly refers to Tuma as Misaka's boyfriend, resulting in Misaka attempting to shock Kuroko with her lightning. Kuroko manages to evade Misaka's attacks and escapes. Shortly afterward, Misaka's doppelganger appears and Misaka introduces her as her sister before guiding her away. On his way back home, Tuma stumbles over a tennis ball and falls to the ground. As he recovers, he notices Misaka's sister carrying military-grade equipment. Intrigued, Tuma inquires about it. Misaka's sister explains that she used to conduct research and offers to help Tuma carry his juice cans. Together, they proceed to Tuma's dormitory, where they encounter Meika, another student from the maid school. Micah discloses that she will be staying in Tuma's room due to a malfunctioning air conditioner. After a brief exchange, Micah playfully teases Tuma about the presence of Misaka's sister in his room before departing on her robotic toy. Tuma and Misaka's sister ride the elevator to Tuma's floor, where they unexpectedly encountered Index, Himgami, and Sphinx. The group explains that they have gathered to rid Sphinx of fleas. Tuma talks down on their methods, but Misaka's sister uses her electric powers to exterminate the fleas. She then departs, leaving behind the juice cans. The following day, Tuma again finds himself dozing off during his makeup class. Komo, his teacher, struggles to capture the students' attention, but to no avail. After the class ends, Tuma finds the real Misaka near a railing. They engage in a conversation about the announcement blimps that hover over the city during the day. Misaka playfully taps Tuma's forehead before telling him goodbye and walking away. Tuma resumes his journey toward his dormitory, where he encounters Misaka's sister one more time. Tuma thanks her for helping him with the drinks earlier on and asks her about the mysterious black cat she seemed to be working on. Misaka's sister proceeds to explain her experiment involving the rescue of the stray cat from an approaching trip to the animal shelter. Tuma kindly offers to help and carries the cat alongside Misaka's sister toward her dormitory. Along the way, Misaka's sister struggles to come up with a good name for the cats. Eventually, they reach a bookstore, where Tuma hands over the cat to Misaka's sister and enters the store to browse for books. Just then, Misaka's sister senses Accelerator's presence nearby and prepares herself for a potential battle between the two of them. Misaka's sister finds herself trapped in an alleyway with Accelerator. She attempts to shoot him with her sniper rifle, but he effortlessly deflects the bullets back at her. Injured and in pain, Misaka's sister lies helpless as Accelerator approaches and touches her wounds. Meanwhile, Tuma finishes purchasing his book and steps back outside, only to realize that Misaka's sister is nowhere to be found. He picks up the stray cat he was carrying and begins searching for her. Tuma heads towards the alleyway and discovers bullet casings scattered on the ground. Curious, he investigates further and comes across a lifeless body. Acting purely out of fear, Tuma calls for an ambulance and the police. When they arrive, Tuma guides them to the alleyway to investigate the scene. However, to his surprise, the lifeless body from earlier is missing. Tuma insists that he saw a dead body, but the police dismiss his claims. Determined to find answers, Tuma rushes ahead and enters another alleyway. He continues running until he eventually finds Misaka's sister alive and well. Tuma is puzzled as to how she managed to survive. Misaka's sister apologizes for causing him concern and then shares a seemingly random password related to an experiment. Confused, Tuma struggles to understand what she's saying. Suddenly, more clones of Misaka's sisters start appearing around Tuma, apologizing profusely for causing him trouble. Tuma stands in disbelief as the clones reveal the serial number of the deceased Misaka. Intrigued, he asks for more information about their identity. They explain that they are clones of Misaka created for military purposes. After providing their explanation, they bid farewell and leave Tuma with a black cat, leaving him dumbfounded. Tuma contemplates whether Misaka was aware of the military's cloning program. Reflecting on their earlier interaction, he concludes that she likely knew about the experiments. At Himgami's dormitory, she and Komo sit down to enjoy a delicious dinner. Just as they are about to eat, there is a knock on their door. Himgami answers the door and finds Index lying on the floor. Himgami immediately closes the door and refuses to let Index in. After a lot of begging, she eventually lets Index in after she uses Sphinx to gain sympathy. Index joins them for dinner. Meanwhile, Tuma heads to Misaka's apartment building to inquire about the clones. He calls her room and speaks with her roommate, recognizing the robotic voice as belonging to Kuroko, or one of her clones. The person informs him that Misaka is not home but suggests that he wait in her room. Upon entering the room, Tuma discovers her roommate sleeping on her own bed. She invites him to sit on Misaka's bed while waiting, but Tuma politely declines, finding it inappropriate. The roommate defends her seemingly perverse behavior and inquires about Tuma's identity. Before he can respond, the dorm supervisor announces a roll call, prompting the woman Kuroko to hide Tuma under her bed to avoid detection. As the supervisor arrives, she instructs Kuroko to find Misaka and meet at the cafeteria for recess. Kuroko leaves Tuma hidden under the bed. Tuma's curiosity gets the better of him, and he searches under the bed and finds a bag with an open zipper there. Upon opening the zipper, he discovers files related to the cloning program. It becomes apparent that Misaka not only knew about the program, but also supported it actively. Overwhelmed by this revelation, Tuma rushes outside and notices the wind turbines spinning despite the absence of wind. This means that Misaka is nearby. Not far away, Misaka stands transfixed, gazing at the rotating turbines. Over dinner, Komo discusses Schrodinger's life as a scientist with Index and Himgami. Using a box of chocolates as context, she tries to explain the concept of replacing normal reality with a mental image of one's desires. Meanwhile, Misaka stands by the same railing, lost in thought. She reminisces about the time when scientists approached her in her younger days and invited her to be part of an experiment. Surprisingly, her mother had no objections to using her child for scientific purposes. News of her level 5 Esper status even reached her classmates, causing Misaka to spend most of her young life avoiding the limelight. Tuma approaches her and asks what she's doing. In response, Misaka tells Tuma that she can do whatever she wants and doesn't have to take orders from a level 0 Esper like Tuma. Tuma, serious for once, presents one of her documents and reads its contents to her. Misaka is shocked, wondering how Tuma managed to get hold of her documents. She remains composed and asks Tuma why he entered her room without permission. Tuma apologizes and inquires about how Misaka acquired those papers. Misaka remains calm and reveals that she has been secretly working to dismantle illegal research facilities throughout the city. Despite constant surveillance by the mother satellite, she has successfully evaded detection and dismantled these facilities. She explains that these research facilities were searching for a way to elevate Accelerator to a level 6 Esper, which is something that has never happened before. Tuma suggests that she could have asked for help instead of resorting to creating clones. However, Misaka says that her battle with Accelerator can only occur 125 times before it becomes a lethal situation. If she dies in reality, Accelerator would lose his motivation to reach level 6, and her other 10,000 clones would be spared from certain death. Misaka gets motivated to search for Accelerator as she gets up to begin her search. Tuma stands in her way as he is determined to protect Misaka from harm. Misaka becomes annoyed and tries to forcefully remove Tuma from her path. She unleashes her lightning powers and readies herself to strike Tuma. However, Tuma stands his ground fearlessly, unfazed by her power. This surprises Misaka, who warns Tuma to take her seriously. Tuma insists that he won't fight her and encourages her to do her best. Misaka fires her first lightning bolt, intentionally missing Tuma. She shoots another bolt, at this time hitting him and causing him to collapse unconscious on the floor. Unknown to Misaka, Tuma has already absorbed the lightning and quickly stands up to face her. Misaka stands puzzled, wondering why her greatest rival, Tuma, refuses to fight her. Tuma explains that he won't harm her due to the terrible experiences she has endured. However, instead of finding solace in his words, Misaka grows increasingly frustrated and tells Tuma to stop thinking she's a good person. She tries shooting more lightning bolts at Tuma, but he absorbs them all. Misaka questions why Tuma is defending a supposed villain like her. Tuma firmly states that he doesn't see her as the villain she believes herself to be. He still believes in their friendship and implores her not to put herself in harm's way. Misaka powers up and issues a final warning to Tuma, but he remains resolute, refusing to let her pass. Misaka, overwhelmed by her emotions, releases all her electricity, engulfing the entire bridge. Once she exhausts her power, she picks up the black stray cat and checks on Tuma. Though he tries to stand, his body is too weak. While on the ground, Tuma ponders a way to stop the scientists' experiment without alarming them or endangering Misaka. One of Misaka's clones arrives at the city's port prepared to fight Accelerator. She utters some code words that activate the environment for the battle and awaits her opponent. Komo takes Himigami and Index to a sauna to relax and relieve their stress. While enjoying a gentle massage, she shares some information about Tuma and his powers. When Himigami asks about Tuma's true abilities, Komo explains that his level 0 Esper status indicates that there is a part of the city's Esper ranking system that they have yet to understand. Tuma is an anomaly, like a castaway that no one bothers to study. Speaking of Tuma, he wakes up in Misaka's arms. Misaka appears unhappy as she questions why he didn't stand up to fight her. Tuma smiles and tells her that he was busy thinking of a way to end the experiment, and he has finally found a plan. When Misaka asks for details, Tuma explains that he simply needs to find a way to make the scientists lose faith in Accelerator's strength. He intends to challenge Accelerator to a duel and defeat him, showing the scientists that a level 0 Esper like himself can overcome a level 5 Esper like Accelerator. Misaka is shocked and tries to talk him out of putting himself in danger. Tuma brushes off her concerns, stands up, and asks Misaka to reveal Accelerator's location so he can meet him. Meanwhile, Accelerator arrives at the city's port to face one of Misaka's clones. They engage in some conversation before the fight. The clone grows impatient and urges Accelerator to start fighting. Accelerator stops talking and charges at the clone. Tuma races desperately to the port, hoping to reach Accelerator before his battle with Misaka begins. Misaka watches from the bridge, surprised by Tuma's audacious move. She looks at the stray black cat in her arms and decides to follow Tuma. Tuma arrives at the port and climbs over the fence. He notices sparks of lightning in the air and assumes the fight has already commenced. Accelerator gains the upper hand in the first part of the battle. Misaka's clone, on the other hand, awaits the wind to gather static electricity, but when it doesn't come, she uses what she has to convert oxygen into ozone, hoping it will suffocate Accelerator. However, Accelerator catches on to her plan, catches up to her, and punches her down. Apparently, Accelerator has the ability to manipulate vectors, including momentum, force, and other scientific concepts that I failed at in science class. His only weakness? Well, you guessed it, Tuma's right hand. Just as Accelerator is about to defeat Misaka's clone, Tuma arrives on the scene. He demands that Accelerator release Misaka, but Accelerator smiles and offers Tuma a chance to leave while he still can. Tuma stands his ground and approaches Accelerator. The clone sees Tuma's actions and wonders why he would risk himself to save someone as insignificant as her. Tuma quiets her and focuses on his own enemy. He delivers some heroic lines and throws a punch at Accelerator. Accelerator responds by kicking the ground, creating a burst of compressed air that propels Tuma backward. Accelerator then uses the railings of a forklift to attack Tuma. Tuma skillfully dodges the attacks and devises a suitable counterattack. Accelerator closes in and touches Tuma, but Tuma uses his right hand to nullify Accelerator's Esper attack. This infuriates Accelerator, leaving him questioning what just happened. In his frustration, he kicks a container, causing flammable dust to scatter. He ignites the area and causes a very big explosion. Tuma surprisingly manages to survive the deadly attack as he quickly moves to a safe distance. Accelerator vows to make him pay for the stress he caused him by blowing up his entire body. He lunges towards Tuma, but Tuma retaliates with a powerful punch from his right hand, landing it on Accelerator's face. Accelerator gets even more annoyed, and the two engage in a fierce battle. Tuma remains calm and continues to deliver punches to his enemy's face. During the fight, Tuma realizes that Accelerator's weakness lies in street fighting, as the powerful Esper wasn't really defending himself well with such techniques. With this knowledge, Tuma decides to go all out and relentlessly destroys his opponent. Accelerator, despite getting punched way too many times, manages to stand up, mutters some incomprehensible words, and causes a plasma ball to form on his head. As the plasma beam grows larger, Accelerator aims it at Tuma's head. Tuma dodges the attack and braces himself for the next attack. Just as Accelerator is about to unleash another beam, Misaka arrives and commands him to stop. Tuma tells Misaka not to interfere, but Misaka apologizes and prepares to attack Accelerator with her Fleming coin. Tuma shouts for them to stop, but the plasma ball continues to expand. Misaka realizes the mechanism behind the plasma ball and formulates a plan. She decides to use her clones to manipulate the wind speed around the city's turbines. By directing enough electrical energy to the turbines and increasing their speed, they can control the wind and prevent Accelerator from compressing it. The plan succeeds and causes an interference in the wind pressure forming the plasma ball. This causes Accelerator to stop forming the plasma ball. Furious at Misaka's interference, Accelerator becomes even more determined to defeat both her and Tuma. Tuma regains his footing and challenges Accelerator to continue fighting. Accelerator charges at Tuma with all his strength, but Tuma evades his attack and delivers a devastating punch. Accelerator's vision fades as he collapses to the ground, exhausted from the powerful blow. Tuma, too, loses consciousness after unleashing his strongest attack and wakes up to find himself touching the chest of one of Misaka's clones. Embarrassed, he assumes he did it on his own, but the clone confesses that she placed his hand there. Tuma is filled with despair as the anesthesia he was under prevented him from feeling anything. Misaka informs Tuma that his plan was successful, as the research on Accelerator has been suspended. However, she and her clones may still be sent to a research facility for further study on cell segmentation and to assist in the creation of a new species. Tuma asks if he will ever see Misaka again, to which she assures him that he will before continuing on her way. The next morning, the doctor checks on Tuma, confirming his well-being, and then leaves. Later, Misaka visits Tuma to express her gratitude and presents him with a box of expensive chocolates. Tuma appreciates the gesture and shares his encounter with the clone earlier that morning. Misaka playfully teases him before bidding him farewell. Tuma reminds her that she should take pride in bringing so many lives into the world through her DNA. Misaka carries the guilt of causing the deaths of most of her clone sisters, but Tuma reassures her not to dwell on it, as he believes they would be grateful to her for giving them life. A few hours later, Index pays Tuma a visit and playfully stands on top of him, biting his head as her way of showing concern for him. Meanwhile, Misaka and her clones resume their normal daily lives, living happily ever after. A few weeks after the intense battle with Accelerator, Tuma is forced to go on a vacation in the countryside with Index. Komo, their teacher, sends them away to let the commotion surrounding their recent fights settle down. Tuma tries to refuse the offer, but Komo insists he has no choice. To add to his frustration, Index, an illegal citizen, manages to persuade him to take her along. Tuma forges an ID for Index, allowing her to leave Academy City. Now he finds himself stuck at a beach resort with Index, who often causes him trouble. As they relax, Index gives Tuma a poisonous jellyfish as a gift, which bites him. Tuma tends to his wounds in their room, and the resort attendant informs him that their visitors will arrive the following day. Tuma spends the day wondering about his parents and cousins, whom he hasn't seen in a while. He has no idea how they might have changed. In the evening, while bathing in the sauna, Index asks Tuma to tell her about his parents. Tuma suggests waiting until they see them the next day, leading Index to throw a tantrum. After their bath, they return to their room and watch a TV show before going to sleep. The next morning, Tuma wakes up to a phone call. The attendant informs him that his parents have already arrived. Tuma finds Index still asleep and goes outside to meet his father. When his father sees him, he rushes over and greets him enthusiastically. Tuma acts surprised and offers to carry his father's bag. However, his father tells him to wait for his mother and cousin, who will be arriving soon. Shortly after, his attractive cousin arrives and throws herself at him. She has grown and developed since the last time he saw her. Tuma tries to get her off him, and just as he does, his mother arrives. Tuma doesn't recognize his mother as she appears much younger, like a 15-year-old. Mistaking her for another cousin, he mutters some disrespectful words to her. It is only when his father reprimands him for speaking to his mother in such a way that Tuma realizes the truth. His 15-year-old mother stands before him. Tuma is dumbfounded and laughs uncontrollably. In a fit of frustration, he rushes back to his room, ignoring his father's attempts to bring him back. However, upon returning to the resort, he discovers that the attendant has been replaced by someone who resembles Misaka's clone. It appears as if someone is altering the characters in Tuma's world. To make matters even stranger, the second attendant, previously an old man, now resembles Style, a magician. Tuma is further shocked when Index comes downstairs dressed in her church attire, but looking like a teenage boy. In the next scene, Tuma wakes up on the beach after being restrained by his family multiple times. He still believes he is trapped in a dream and will soon wake up. However, his father arrives, assuring him that he is not dreaming. Soon after, his mother appears, dressed provocatively, with her swimsuit barely covering her private areas. Finally, Index, now appearing as a teenage boy, joins them and chases Tuma away. Tuma returns to the resort and finds the attendants watching a news report about the White House in the USA. Curious, he watches the report and is surprised to see Komo reporting live from the USA, with Misaka serving as the president. Weird and awkward events continue to unfold, leaving Tuma utterly confused. When he can no longer bear it, he decides to go outside for some fresh air. As he climbs a staircase to a relaxation spot, he encounters a peculiarly dressed girl in chains. The girl mistakes Tuma for the caster and attacks him. Luckily, Kanzaki and his classmate Tsuchimikado, who is actually a member of the church, intervene and stop her from harming Tuma. Tuma is astonished to see the duo at the resort and asks for an explanation. Kanzaki informs him that he is in a world similar to a genjutsu in Naruto's terms. The caster, however, remains hidden, waiting for their spell to be complete and change the world entirely. The chained girl, named Misha, apologizes for her actions and reveals herself as a purist from the church in Russia. After introductions are made, Kanzaki and the others explain the existence of the Tree of Sephiroth, which ranks the angels in heaven. They suspect a powerful magician, possibly a fallen angel, is responsible for the distorted world they find themselves in. Initially, they suspected Tuma, but now that he is clueless about the situation, they suspect another individual. Suddenly, Misha summons a water monster to attack Tuma. Tuma defends himself using his imagined breaker, confirming Misha's suspicion that he is a true level 0 Esper. Tuma turns to Tsuchimikado and inquires about his extensive knowledge of the church and magic. Tsuchimikado reveals that he has always been a member of the church, although Tuma had been unaware of it. That night, Tuma reflects on his earlier meeting with the others and recalls Tsuchimikado revealing his true identity as a church agent assigned to spy on him. Kanzaki also suggests that the spellcaster could be someone close to Tuma. When asked if his parents looked the same as he remembered, Tuma is left speechless. Tsuchimikado joins him on the balcony and explains his role as an idol star serving as a cover during their investigation. Tuma ponders why Tsuchimikado practiced magic despite being an Esper. His friend reveals Kanzaki's secret identity as a princess destined to lead her worshiper clan in the future. Tsuchimikado further reveals that Style's consciousness resides within Kanzaki, resulting in her resembling him. As they discuss, Kanzaki rushes into the room, unable to tolerate the inappropriate touches any longer. She asks Tuma to accompany her to the bathhouse so she can clean up. At the bathhouse, Tuma reveals that he is aware of Kanzaki's true identity. Kanzaki doesn't mind and asks Tuma to keep watch over the men's bathhouse while she takes a bath since she feels uncomfortable using the women's area. Tuma stands guard as Kanzaki bathes. A few minutes after Kanzaki finishes bathing, Tuma's father enters the bathhouse and pulls Tuma inside to bathe with him as men. Tuma tries to warn him of the danger, but his father enters anyway. Inside, they discover Kanzaki's unclothed body and hastily retreat. Tuma and his father take a moment to rest in the garden from their frantic escape. His father asks for some information about Kanzaki, and Tuma fills him in before questioning whether the person he's talking to is truly his father or an imposter. Sensing Tuma's change in mood, his father inquires about it, and Tuma assures him that everything is fine. They engage in personal conversation, and afterwards, they spot Misha alone in the garden. His father leaves Tuma alone with Misha to converse and returns inside. Tuma tries to speak with the Russian girl, but she remains unresponsive. He offers her some gum, and she accepts. Tuma then asks for information about Angel Fall, hoping to uncover why she initially suspected him of being involved in the spell. Misha shares her observations and mentions the importance of finding the caster before the spell is completed, as it could jeopardize their world. Returning to the resort, Tuma overhears his father and mother about to engage in intimate activities in their room upstairs. Worried, he rushes in to prevent them from going any further. The following day, the Fox Index roams the corridor, concerned about Tuma's absence the previous day. Tuma's mother emerges from their room preparing for an outing. When asked where she is going, she informs them that she is returning to their original house to lock the front door. Misha offers to accompany her, and they depart the resort together. Tuma and his father engage in another argument before the scene fades to black. Tuma's father reveals that Misha refused to touch Tuma's right hand in the garden. Tuma meets up with his companions in the garden to discuss the angel fall spell. He shares Misha's information from the previous night and questions why she couldn't touch his hand. They collectively conclude that Misha must be the caster and want to prevent the cancellation of the spell. They urgently need to reach Tuma's parents' house. Tuma obtains a map from his father and takes a taxi to their destination. Upon arriving at his parents' house, they discover it completely empty. Tuma enters and finds peculiar souvenirs in his father's collection. He stumbles upon a scrambled drawing from his childhood and continues exploring. He comes across a photograph of his father and notices that he appears the same as before. This raises suspicion that his father might be the spell caster. Just then, Misha and his mother arrive. Upon seeing them, Misha flees and Tuma chases after her, questioning why his father would cast such a spell. Inadvertently, he encounters Hemgami, who is disguised as a bus driver but unaware of her true identity. Tuma quickly asks for a ride and she obliges, taking him in her truck. That evening, Tuma rushes back to the resort and finds Kanzaki there. He inquires about his father and updates her on what he has learned. Kanzaki prepares to handle Tuma's father, but Tuma decides to confront him himself. He reaches the beach and finds his father gazing at the horizon. At the beach, Tuma confronts his father about his involvement with the occult. His father explains that when Tuma was younger, he was considered a child of misfortune due to the bad luck that seemed to follow him. In an attempt to change his luck, his father turned to the occult after science failed to help. Tuma expresses his discontent with his father's actions, stating that he was fine with his misfortune and that his father should not have interfered in his life. His father appears surprised and admits that collecting occult souvenirs wouldn't bring any good luck to Tuma. Tuma then asks his father if he knows about the angel fall spell, but his father claims to know nothing about it. Tuma inquires about his mother's whereabouts and his father tells him that Tuma was the last person to see her. At that moment, Misha arrives at the beach with them. Tuma demands to know her true identity, but Misha draws her weapon and prepares to attack Tuma and his father. Kanzaki arrives just in time and forbids Misha from taking any lives without the creator's permission. She explains that the person before them is not the real Misha, but an imposter from the church of the creator. Misha transforms the day into night, revealing her wings and raises her mace like an angel. She summons a magic dome called the Sweep. Tuma prepares to use his right hand to nullify the fallen angel's magic, but Kanzaki warns him against it, as his power is ineffective against angels. Suddenly, intense music starts playing, signaling a serious battle. Tuma grabs his father's hand and escapes, leaving Kanzaki to fight the fallen angel. Once they reach their house, Tuma finds his mother unconscious. He suspects his father is pretending to be clueless and urges him to reveal the location of the ritual to break the magic seal before the spell is completed. His father appears increasingly confused. Tsuchimikado arrives and explains that although Tuma's father was a suspect, he didn't know what he was doing. The souvenirs his father collected from various countries were actually the components needed for the ritual. When they left their house, the ritual was activated. The only option now is to either destroy the spellcaster, Eka Tuma's father, or use magic to break the seal. Tuma tries to defend his father, but Tsuchimikado knocks him out. Eventually, Tuma's father decides to destroy the magic seal using his own magic, despite the danger as an expert using magic could lead to death. He retrieves 5 jars from his pocket and throws them to each corner of the room. The floor illuminates and Tsuchimikado begins chanting the spells to stop the angel fall spell. As he speaks, he starts to bleed, but he completes the spell and sends a powerful plasma beam towards Misha, obliterating her. Suddenly, daylight returns and Kanzaki is saved. Tuma regains consciousness and checks on his father, who miraculously survives. However, Tsuchimikado's condition is more critical. In the next scene, Tuma wakes up in a hospital bed and finds Tsuchimikado alive and well. Tsuchimikado reveals that he used his auto-rebirth powers to come back to life. A few moments later, Tuma's parents arrive and inform him that their house was destroyed in the explosion. They will have to live in the old mansion they rented for now. Tuma looks at his mother and recognizes her as his true mother, not the 15-year-old girl she appeared to be earlier. Index arrives shortly after and complains about the things Tuma did to her when she was in her other form. In retaliation, she jumps on Tuma and bites him. Some nights after being discharged from the hospital, Tuma wakes up in his dorm room with a nosebleed. He tries to get tissue paper from Index's bed without waking her up. However, Index wakes up and misunderstands his actions, thinking he was being perverted. Tuma tries to explain himself, but Index bites his head. He checks the time and realizes that summer vacation has come to an end. The next day, Micah and the others return to school. Micah serves Misaka for a while, but Misaka gets bored and decides to leave. As she walks outside the maid school, she encounters her stalker, Onabara. Onabara approaches her and asks her out, but Misaka, feeling uncomfortable, tries to politely decline his request. Onabara doesn't take the hint and keeps insisting on accompanying her wherever she goes. Desperate to get rid of him, Misaka grabs Tuma and asks him to pretend to be her boyfriend. Everyone sees them holding hands and gets the wrong idea. Misaka takes Tuma to a nearby restaurant and explains the situation with her stalker. Onabara is the superintendent's son, making it difficult for her to simply reject him. She asks Tuma to pretend to be her boyfriend so that Yumanabara will back off. Tuma teases her and tells her to wipe the mustard off her nose before giving him an answer. Misaka embarrassedly cleans her nose and hands Tuma his hot dog. Tuma then asks for advice on how to make their relationship appear more believable. Misaka suggests a few things and Tuma listens attentively. Afterwards, they work on their homework together, with Misaka helping Tuma complete it quickly. Once they finish, Misaka leaves to get drinks for both of them. As Tuma looks ahead, he sees Onabara playing with a young boy and his dog. Onabara notices Tuma and approaches him for a conversation. They talk and Tuma discovers that Onabara is actually a good person who is just overly infatuated with someone. Misaka sees Tuma talking with Yunabara and asks for a moment alone with Tuma. Tuma advises her to give Yunabara a chance and see how things go. Misaka considers it and thanks Tuma for his help. She walks away to another store to join the crowd and buy drinks. Onabara stays with Tuma to discuss the situation further. Suddenly, Tuma notices someone who looks just like Yunabara rushing into the crowd to warn Misaka of impending danger. He asks Onabara if he has a brother, but the Yunabara standing near him plays it cool until it's too late. He slaps Tuma on the back and starts a fight with him. Tuma runs into the alleyways and calls Index for information. Index tells him about the black obsidian knife, the weapon the fake Yunabara was wielding. Tuma keeps running until he is cornered at a construction site. The imposter challenges him to a fight and Tuma punches him in the face. Suddenly, the imposter's face begins to crumble, revealing a hideous monster underneath. The monster reveals that he is after the Kamijo faction and is determined to take them down. Tuma charges at the monster and punches the knife with his right hand, destroying it and rendering the monster powerless. The beam falls on them, but Tuma manages to dodge it in time. He asks the monster some questions before continuing the fight. Heavy iron beams keep falling on them, adding to the chaos. At one point, a laser beam falls directly on the monster, but instead of getting crushed, it is split and trapped by Misaka's lightning. Misaka is uncertain about what to do, whether to give Yunabara a chance or eliminate the threat altogether. Not much screen time is given to the Yunabara and Misaka love story, nor to Accelerator's life after his defeat by Tuma. However, Accelerator goes to a nearby convenience store one night to buy groceries. When he finishes shopping, he walks back through the streets of Academy City and encounters a group of thugs who attempt to attack him. These thugs mistakenly believe that Accelerator has become weak after his defeat by Tuma. Accelerator sighs and effortlessly defeats all of them before continuing his journey home. This time, he feels calmer and more composed as he walks through the streets. During his walk, Accelerator notices a small person in a cloak following him. He allows the person, who turns out to be a clone of Misaka, to speak. This Misaka clone speaks at a swift pace, leaving Accelerator skeptical about her true intentions. Accelerator removes her cloak to verify her identity and exposes her bare body. Misaka shrinks to the ground, feeling embarrassed and cold. Accelerator returns her cloak and proceeds to his apartment building with a clone, designated as 20,001, persistently following him and disturbing his life. Feeling exhausted by the clone's constant presence, Accelerator questions her motives. She reveals that she suspects Accelerator knows more about the scientists involved in the research that has been shut down. Despite this revelation, Accelerator remains composed and reaches his apartment floor. Upon entering his room, he discovers that it has been trashed. Misaka suggests calling the authorities to investigate, but Accelerator chooses to ignore it and simply goes to sleep on the couch. He advises Misaka to do the same, recognizing that the following day may be challenging. The next morning, Accelerator wakes up to find Misaka clone 20,001 speaking nonsense. He prepares for the day and goes to a nearby diner for breakfast. While Misaka selects her food, Accelerator notices the scientist Almai-Eo entering his supercar. This sight angers Accelerator and he contemplates confronting the scientist. However, he hesitates too long and Almai-Eo notices him and quickly leaves. When their food arrives, Accelerator patiently allows the talkative Misaka clone to eat first. During their conversation, Accelerator asks about the excessive talking, wondering what is in her brain. Misaka assures him that even if she were to be killed, there would be countless annoying Misaka clones to take her place, thanks to what she possesses in her brain. Attempting to maintain his bad side, Accelerator threatens to kill them off one by one. However, Misaka sees through his facade and reveals that she knows he never truly liked the experiments. She proceeds to share information about Accelerator that he has never disclosed to anyone before. Shocked, Accelerator looks at her with disdain and decides to leave. Misaka's clone faints due to exhaustion and lack of nutrients from the incubation tank. Accelerator takes her to his home, showing a moment of care and compassion. Accelerator then pays a visit to Yoshikawa, an old scientist, in order to borrow an adjustment manual for one of the Misaka clones. During their conversation, Yoshikawa informs Accelerator about an anomaly in the creation system of the Misaka clones. She reveals that Misaka is the last remaining clone from a particular batch and is meant to be the leader of the Misaka army. However, 7 days ago, someone infected Misaka's personality folder with malware code. The activation time for this virus is set for midnight that night. If the virus successfully activates, all of the Misaka clones will go berserk. Accelerator asks Yoshikawa about the person responsible for the virus, and she reveals that Amai-O wrote the code. Motivated by his personal grudge against Amai-O, Accelerator feels compelled to help the Misakas and eliminate the virus. Yoshikawa provides him with a file that can be used to track down Amai-O. Accelerator reflects on his past and the fact that he was born with level 5 Esper powers, making him a perceived threat to national security. He remembers how the Army and Navy had been after him for years but were unable to capture him. Determined to save Misaka, Accelerator returns to the restaurant where he left her and learns from the waitress that a man in a white lab coat took her away. He quickly contacts Yoshikawa and informs her of the situation. Together, they work to locate Amai-O, eventually pinpointing his whereabouts in a secluded area of the city's suburbs. Accelerator smiles and races towards the location. In the next scene, Amai-O is seen waiting anxiously for the virus to activate. He connects his workstation to Misaka's brain, monitoring her vitals as he waits for the virus to take effect. Suddenly, he notices Accelerator approaching him through his side mirror. Amai quickly reverses his car and attempts to drive towards Accelerator, but Accelerator uses his force field to stop the car and trap Amai. With Amai unconscious, Accelerator turns his attention to the resting Misaka clone. He discovers electrodes in her head and contacts Yoshikawa for information on how to stop the virus. Yoshikawa informs him that they need a special incubation tank and medicine to isolate and neutralize the virus code. She assures him that she is on her way to help. However, Misaka clone starts speaking rapidly, causing the EKG monitor to overload. Yoshikawa realizes that the virus is attempting to activate itself and time is running out. She advises Accelerator to dispose of the clone to save the others. Accelerator, determined to save Misaka's sister without killing her, comes up with a risky plan. He decides to substitute himself for a testament machine and enter Misaka's brain to manipulate her personality file and reset her to a previous state. Yoshikawa tries to dissuade him from the dangerous plan, but Accelerator destroys nearby objects, preparing himself for the ritual. He enters Misaka's brain and begins rewriting the code to reset her. However, Amai wakes up and points his gun at Accelerator. Just before Accelerator completes the hack, Amai shoots him in the head. Accelerator falls unconscious, but the virus sequence is erased and the system restarts. Accelerator regains consciousness with a bleeding forehead, having managed to solidify his cranium to prevent the bullet from penetrating too deeply. He walks towards Amai, intending to end him, but collapses on the way. Amai laughs maniacally and prepares to shoot the unconscious Accelerator. However, Yoshikawa arrives in time and takes down Amai instead. Amai falls to the ground, exchanging one last look with his assailant before losing consciousness. Yoshikawa apologizes for her naivety and shares some inspirational words before kneeling to finish off Amai. Amai also raises his gun and utters some final words before they both pull the trigger simultaneously. Yoshikawa wakes up after surgery and finds her doctor nearby. She discovers that she survived the attack thanks to the doctor's efforts. The doctor informs her that Accelerator kept her heart beating until they reached the hospital. Yoshikawa expresses her gratitude and asks about Misaka, learning that the little girl is not only safe, but also with Accelerator at his home. She is relieved to hear that the research has been completely terminated by the higher-ups. Thanking the doctor, Yoshikawa allows herself to rest, reflecting on Accelerator's heroic actions and smiling at his bravery. A few days have passed, and it's the first day of the new school session for Tuma. He has breakfast with his roommate Index and promises to take her out later. While on his way to school, Tuma encounters the real Misaka, who is in a rush. He stops her and asks why she's eager to get to school. Misaka teases him about their previous antics of pretending to be a couple to fool the class. Tuma interrupts her and runs to school. At the parking lot, he meets his teacher Komo, who has a bunch of papers. Komo explains that she has been assigned to write a white paper for a research institute and talks about power levels and involuntary actions. Meanwhile, Tsuchimikado is teleported to meet Aleister in the magical room. Aleister informs him about an intruder named Shelley from the English Purist Church and assigns Tuma to deal with her. Tuma notices Tsuchimikado's absence and asks his dummy friend, who doesn't know where Tsuchimikado is. Komo arrives and introduces the new transfer student, Index, to the class. However, they realize they've made a mistake when the real transfer student, Himgami, enters the class. Tuma and Komo quickly correct the confusion and send Index outside to wait. Index walks a bit and gets hungry. She tries to buy food from a vending machine near the school but gets confused. Hyuka, one of the students, helps her out. Index thanks her and invites her to sit together in the cafeteria. Hyuka reveals that she is also a transfer student. Tuma finishes class and goes to the bathroom, but he hears voices coming from a nearby room. He barges in and finds Index and Hyuka changing clothes, and he accidentally gets punched in the face. Tuma settles down with Index and asks about Hyuka, but she has disappeared. During lunch break, Index finds Hyuka hiding behind a tree in the schoolyard. Index talks to her about Tuma's feelings and wonders if he hates her. Hyuka reassures Index not to worry and says that Tuma still cares for her. Tuma arrives and invites the girls to go out with him. However, Tuma realizes he has no cash and goes to the ATM to withdraw some money. Himgami confronts him there, accusing him of abandoning her. Tuma invites her to join them for lunch. Himigami gets embarrassed and asks about Hyuka. She reveals that Hyuka attended her previous high school, but nobody could find or recognize her in the class. Himigami did some digging and discovered that Hyuka called Counterstop and is connected to the Five Elements Institution, a secretive organization influencing Academy City. Before leaving, Himigami warns Tuma to be careful around Hyuka. Tama takes everyone to a restaurant and Hyuka, despite being shy, joins them. Back at school, Komo discusses Tuma's association with a mysterious new student with her fellow teacher, Yamakawa. While they talk, Yamakawa receives a work call and leaves. Shortly after, Himigami brings Komo a book from the library and asks her to investigate Hyuka. In another part of the city, Shirai Kuroko encounters an imposter and apprehends her. The imposter summons a golem and holds Kuroko captive. However, Misaka arrives in time to destroy the golem and helps Kuroko. They learn that the imposter escapes to another part of town and summons a more powerful golem to search for something. After school, Tuma, Index, and Hyuka visit the underground mall. While the girls are shopping, Tuma receives a strange phone call from someone asking for help. The call abruptly ends, but Tuma doesn't pay much attention to it since they are in a crowded mall. He joins the girls in the swimsuit section, where they decide to try on swimsuits. Tuma searches for them in the mall, but accidentally stumbles into the changing room and sees the girls half-clothed, leading to them punching him. They later take pictures in a photo booth and head home. While walking through the mall's hallway, Misaka arrives and attempts to communicate telepathically with Tuma and the others. When that fails, she informs them verbally that a terrorist is in the mall ready to attack. The mall is evacuated, but one of the terrorists' golem eyes spots Tuma and his group. The imposter woman, Shelly, locks down the mall and cuts off the power. Tuma tells Index and Hyuka to leave the mall immediately, but Index insists on staying to fight. After some arguments, Misaka and Kuroko join them. Misaka and Index engage in a sassy argument, while Tuma tries to avoid getting caught in the middle. Eventually, Tuma asks Kuroko about the situation, and she reveals that she still needs to evacuate other citizens. Tuma instructs her to take Index and Hyuka to safety, leaving him to fight alongside Misaka. Tuma follows the rumbling sound and discovers officers shooting at a golem controlled by Shelly. He joins the officers in battle. Shelly recognizes Tuma as the imagined breaker and sees killing him as a valuable accomplishment. She stops the golem from attacking and reveals that she is from the English Purist Church, surprising Tuma since Index is also connected to that church. Despite their shared affiliation, Shelly continues to attack. Tuma successfully blocks all of the golem's attacks and notices Hyuka standing nearby. He tries to protect her, but the golem punches her face, crushing a part of it. Hyuka wakes up, realizing the damage to her face and the presence of a strange light beneath it. Overwhelmed, she goes into a frenzy and runs away, with Shelly and her golem in pursuit. Meanwhile, Kuroko finds other trapped individuals underground who are trying to escape. Tuma receives a call from Komo, who informs him about Hyuka's true identity. Hyuka is a unique being created from the combination of bioelectricity from the city's spears, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. She has been living like a ghost invisible to the naked eye, but fortunately, she lacks any malicious intentions. Hyuka is seen in an underground sewer network, healing her damaged face. Shelly and her golem discover her and prepare to destroy her, emphasizing that she is abnormal and must be eliminated. Shelly upgrades her golem for the confrontation. Hyuka sheds a tear and reminisces about her time with Index. As the golem lunges toward her, Tuma arrives just in time to intervene and prevent the attack. After saving Hyuka, Tuma confronts her, urging her to stop acting strange and fight alongside him. However, Shelly summons an even stronger golem and commands it to attack Tuma and Hyuka. Just when Shelly thinks she has cornered her targets, officers arrive and chase her away. Tuma's determination is reignited, and he prepares himself for a second confrontation. Shelly controls her golem to attack Tuma while summoning the powers of the four archangels to aid her in fighting against Tuma's imagined breaker. Tuma takes cover behind riot shields and communicates with one of the officers, asking for a path to be opened for him when the time is right. Hyuka tries to dissuade Tuma from endangering himself, but he insists that he has no choice but to defeat the monster. He takes a leap of faith and positions himself in front of the golem. Shelly notices the imminent threat and sends her golem Eldest to attack Tuma. However, Tuma skillfully evades the golem's attacks and reaches Shelly. He delivers a powerful punch that sends her flying to the ground. Tuma prepares to punch the golem with his right hand, but Shelly regains consciousness and uses a magic spell to create a hole in the ground, escaping the fight altogether. As Shelly lies in the sand, Tuma senses that something is amiss. Shelly herself reveals that she desires war and needs a reason to instigate it, which is why she attacked Tuma and Hyuka. However, something doesn't add up. If Hyuka was her intended target, why didn't she simply take her? Suddenly, it clicks in Tuma's mind. Shelly is likely after Index, not Hyuka. Meanwhile, Index and Misaka wait at a subway station on the surface, anticipating the return of Tuma and Hyuka. Index expresses concern for Hyuka and frets over the spells she observed Shelly using. Misaka questions why Index isn't worried about Tuma, to which Index responds that she knows Tuma will come back no matter what happens. Sphinx, Index's cat, suddenly dashes out of her clothes and runs away. Misaka tells Index to go after the cat while she waits. Tuma argues with the officers, insisting that they remove the seals blocking their path. However, the officers explain that they lack the authority to lift the seals. Tuma contemplates jumping into the hole and confronting Shelly directly, but Hyuka intervenes. She remembers the short time she spent with Index and her friend Tuma, cherishing those moments. To protect Tuma from harm, Hyuka makes the decision to sacrifice herself by jumping into the hole and facing Shelly alone. Hyuka climbs onto the train tracks and races to find Shelly and the monster. She recalls her previous existence as an entity suspended between dimensions, able to perceive every vector around her, including humans, a being invisible to everyone. One day, she grew bored and witnessed Index struggling with a vending machine. Moved to help, she materialized and transformed into a human being. Index finds Sphinx at a construction site and retrieves him. Suddenly, Shelly's golem emerges from a manhole and confronts Index. Using her knowledge of the code behind Shelly's spell, Index manipulates the golem into sabotaging itself. This tactic proves effective initially, but the golem regains control and throws Index off balance, preparing to strike her. After following Hyuka to the train tracks, Tuma encounters Shelly, who informs him that her golem is currently dealing with Hyuka. Shelly reveals that in the past, Academy City officials attempted to combine the powers of espers and magicians to create a chimera with both abilities. Among the subjects chosen was Ellis, Shelly's friend. However, the experiment failed and the officials brutally killed Ellis. Ever since then, Shelly has sought revenge against the city. Now that she has found Tuma, the strongest esper, she believes she can achieve her goal and leave the city defenseless. Shelly activates her magic seals and begins causing the tunnel to collapse. Tama reacts quickly, rushing towards Shelly and delivering a punch with his right hand. The attack distorts Shelly's vision and disrupts the spell, deactivating it. Shelly recovers and attempts to walk away to regroup and come up with a new plan, but Tuma stops her. He has a heartfelt conversation with her, reminding her that she is not the only one who has faced hardships. Tuma shares his own experiences of loss and being labeled as a town's misfortune, vowing not to let Shelly have her way. Shelly becomes emotional and launches another magic attack, but Tuma anticipates it and knocks her unconscious with a punch. Meanwhile, at the surface, Index finds herself cornered by the golem. Just as it is about to attack, Hyuka arrives and punches the golem, temporarily incapacitating it. The golem retaliates by creating a vortex on its chest that sucks in everything in its path. However, both Hyuka and Index survive the attack. The golem prepares for another strike, but Hyuka summons all of her strength to hold it back. Just as the golem is about to land another blow, Tuma arrives and uses his right hand to stop the attack. Misaka and Kuroko join them after the golem is defeated, with Misaka teasing Tuma as usual and Kuroko expressing her affection for Misaka. In the next scene, Tuma takes Hyuka to the top of Crane. As they reach the top, Hyuka opens up about her dear friend and the earlier attack. Overwhelmed with emotions, Hyuka breaks down in tears and Tuma comforts her, assuring her that her ability to feel and cry makes her truly human. At that moment, Index joins them on the crane and rushes to embrace Hyuka. Meanwhile, Tsuchimikado meets with a Leister to discuss a flaw in their previous plan. During their conversation, Tsuchimikado deduces that a Leister is an angel who desires to create heaven on earth. Tsuchimikado withdraws his support but warns a Leister about Tuma's unpredictable nature. A Leister heeds the warning and is left alone. Later, Tuma and the girls have some lighthearted fun with a doctor at the hospital. Afterwards, Index and Hyuka spend some time alone. Index notices Hyuka glitching and asks about it. Hyuka explains that it's a side effect of staying too long in their dimension. She tells Index it's time for her to return to her own dimension, bids her farewell and disappears back to her alternate reality. Life returns to normal after the events settle down. Tsuchimikado leaves school, Tuma resumes his role as the dummy at school. Misaka continues to face Kuroko's affectionate assaults and everything returns to a state of normalcy. The story gives a glimpse of the next significant character, Archbishop Laura Stewart, who enjoys lunch under the watchful eye of her bodyguard. Index tracks Tuma down at school again and playfully chides him for forgetting to put food in the fridge, biting his head once more.